Social media presents real estate wealth as a series of massive stage checks held in front of glass skyscrapers. The actual climb starts in silence. It begins in an empty apartment at 1 a.m., smelling faintly of the previous tenant's cigarette smoke. Before the institutional capital and the sprawling organizational charts, there is level zero. For this empire, the starting line was a 1974 brick duplex, purchased with $47,000 of personal savings and a small loan from a brother-in-law, who still brings it up at Thanksgiving. Real estate offers a specific mechanical advantage. A bank will let you control 80% of a physical asset while you only put up 20% of the cost. You harness that leverage to generate immediate rent while waiting for appreciation. But the spreadsheet isn't optimist. You quickly learn that cash flow is the small amount left over after the building throws its worst surprises at you. It is what survives after a garbage disposal shatters at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and a unit sits vacant for 3 weeks. Scaling to $1 billion depends on surviving the operational breaking points that force a reinvention of the business model. The first breaking point arrives when you hit the capital ceiling. Your $47,000 is trapped in a down payment, a new roof, and a plumber's invoice. You find your next great deal, but you have zero liquidity to close it. Crossing this threshold requires a shift in identity. You move from a solo landlord to a sponsor. You cobble together $95,000 from coworkers and family members to fund the next acquisition. This partnership relies on a strict legal architecture. You become the general partner, or GP. You find the deal, sign the loan, manage the asset, and carry the operational risk. Your investors act as limited partners, or LPs, supplying capital for passive returns with no operational say. The financial rewards follow a rigid sequence. You structure a preferred return, usually 7%, that flows to your LPs before you take a dollar of profit. Only after they clear that hurdle do you split the remaining profit, typically 70-30 in their favor. That 30% slice of the upside is called carried interest. While modest on a single duplex, it becomes the mathematical engine that generates wealth as it multiplies across dozens of deals over a decade. At this stage, a track record of returning capital on time becomes the primary currency for building institutional trust. Around $50 million in assets under management, the personal hustle breaks down. You cannot physically answer every investor email and personally inspect every roof leak across dozens of properties. Scaling further demands a corporate architecture. You hire specialized talent, a director of acquisitions to underwrite deals, an asset manager to optimize portfolio performance, and investor relations to produce audited quarterly reports. This scale exposes a hidden danger: concentration. If you own 17 properties in one city, a single local zoning change or the relocation of a regional employer can cripple the entire fund simultaneously. You neutralize this risk through diversification. You acquire industrial flex space 2 states over and grocery-anchored retail in growing Sunbelt metros, spreading capital across different geographies and asset classes. A concentrated portfolio of 17 assets remains a dangerous bet. True scale requires the discipline to build a defensively structured portfolio. Past the $75 million mark, the profile of your investors shifts. You stop pitching to individuals and start receiving calls from quiet generational wealth, family offices, and regional pension funds. Institutional money prioritizes rigid systems over founder charisma. They require 50-page due diligence questionnaires, audited financials, and dedicated fund administration software to eliminate rounding errors. Your strategy for debt changes as well. You transition from simple mortgages to actively managed portfolio-level leverage. You negotiate with life insurance companies and debt funds, staggering maturities so you never face a wall of refinancing risk in a single year. Eventually, the market tests these systems. A downturn hits. Interest rates spike, cap rates move against you, and property values drop. Investors who have never lived through a cycle begin asking difficult questions. The funds that survive a cycle rely on an operational spine built to bend, not break. Managing a bad year with transparency builds a bond of trust that serves as your most durable asset. At level 5, the founder becomes the CEO of a billion-dollar institution, overseeing an acquisitions team, a development arm, and an asset management division simultaneously. At this scale, you no longer chase deal flow. Brokers call you before a listing goes live. Your reputation for guaranteed closing is the rarest commodity in the market, allowing you to win bids even when you aren't the highest offer. Your primary job becomes a treasury balancing act. You must satisfy your LP's demand for predictable, scheduled yield while simultaneously reinvesting for growth and platform expansion. Billion-dollar funds rarely collapse from a single bad deal. They fracture when they scale their assets while relying on reporting systems built for a much smaller operation. The weight of the data eventually crushes the infrastructure. They also fall into the trap of dry powder, accepting massive capital they cannot deploy responsibly just to collect management fees. This sitting cash acts as a quiet tax on investor trust, hollowing out the firm's reputation. The dollar amounts change by a factor of 1,000, but the fundamental discipline remains the same. You underwrite honestly, build systems before you need them, and protect investor capital above your own. The same spine that held the first duplex together is what supports a billion-dollar empire.